I can't hear you. So okay, mute.
No,
Good.
It's fine.
Could you hear me?
I hear you all.
Okay, great.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, of course, yes.
Yeah. Because
it's too much early for you. Good.
No. I'm just generally in a bad mood, you know. Like I was born at the wrong time in the wrong world and so on. And I was a little bit not depressed because, you know, this morning it was known now who are people who will be pardoned by Trump in his last day.
Yeah.
And there was a secret hope, crazy, that maybe as a crazy gesture, there were some hints. Julian Assange and Snowden will be on it. They are not on it. It's just the usual corrupted gang, Steve Bannon and so on. Okay, he also, because he was convinced, I heard, in the last minute not to do it, he didn't pardon his family and himself. I would like this paradox, to be able to pardon yourself, because you know who is here my ideal? I read this, I will be very brief, not take your time too much, in a book on Martin Luther, not King, the black fighter, but Protestantism, religion, no?
Right.
And do you know what was so shocking for Luther when he visited Rome? Let's say you are a rich guy, you were not only, it was not only possible if you were wealthy and influential to simply buy off your sin. You did something horrible, you pay a big sum to the church, you were pardoned, but there was a wonderful twist. You could pay so that you are nonetheless saved for future sins. Like, I have a rich uncle, I want his money, I want to kill him, but in advance, I make it sure that I will be pardoned, you know. Like, I would like to introduce this into, but okay, I talk too much. Who is the boss?
I'm gonna be a host. So I'm gonna actually carry on the, whole sequels. So actually please actually follow my, direction. And so I want to introduce actually my friend, Job, and Manoji. Manoji from India, Job from Japan. Just say hello to each other.
Hello.
Okay. You from India, you are from that university which is all the time in trouble.
Yes, Jamia.
Jamia Islamia.
Thanks for your message last time. Like it was around this year, this time last year that we got your message and we were in trouble at that
Yeah,
moment.
exactly.
Yeah.
But how is this going now? Because, these things don't necessarily mean a lot, but symbolically, yes. I read in the newspapers that now, I don't know the name, the guy who killed Mahatma Gandhi, that now he's in some Hindu circles treated as a saint. There is now a sacred place for him and so on. I mean, this is going pretty far politically. Sorry?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I mean, okay, who cares? It's just a symbol, but it's probably behind this, there is a lot of horrible political measures, actual, not just symbolic acts, no?
This protest was all halted just because of the pandemic. Right now, the protest against CA and the Citizenship Act was halted by the pandemic, and then it is completely dispersed right now. Now the university is also not functional, so that sort of protest is sort of arrested. But right now, at this age, as a sort of repetition, there is a farmer protest going on.
Yeah.
And then the fringes of Delhi, farmers are on the street.
The farmers against the Modi government.
Yeah, against the Modi government.
Okay, let's not. Okay, no, I know this, but okay, we don't have time if we want to go, because I was always interested in this situation. For example, already how I knew the situation in a little bit in Kerala and around Kolkata, West Bank.
Yeah.
No, West Bank, not that West Bank, but India, East, sorry, East, Bengal, where I heard that communists became there more businessmen and started to sell land, and that the result was many, many thousands of small farmers doing suicides, no, and so on.
Yeah, that was the situation in Bengal. I'm not very much aware of the situation in Bengal. I cannot authentically say about it. But in Kerala, it's not the case. In Kerala, I think the Communist Party is right now in power, and they have done a good job.
That's good.
Yeah, they have done a good job during the pandemic, I guess. Yeah.
Also this, but also it's a little bit vulgar explanation, but maybe also because I read somewhere that they are relatively well organized and so on, but also many people from Kerala worked in the Arab Emirates and they get some money back. That this also makes a little bit easier, no?
Yes.
And it's a popular tourist destination, no?
Yes. Yeah.
Wait.
You have been in Kerala in 2010, I guess, right?
Sorry?
You came to Kerala in 2010, I guess. Like as
I know. It looks so fast. Now I have a different classification of time. I think there will soon be children to whom we will be saying, you remember that time when we just took a plane and went somewhere and so on. This is becoming another universe. Sorry, but we are losing time. I'm very sorry that I talk too much.
Okay.
If Alex is the boss,
it's time to start. All right.
Yes.
It's time to start. Actually, people start joining us. Welcome to this event. Actually, this kind of the lecture series. Today is actually the first episode we're actually gonna open. So we have 2 channels in Zoom as well as actually YouTube Live. So anybody can watch what we are doing on the YouTube. And then if you have a kind of question after this session was in the middle of our talk, please actually put down on the chat, the live chat. We can read it and then just try to actually answer to actually your question. Okay, just let's start. Let's kick off this event. I'm very glad and honored to have Slavoj, my friend and comrade, and then also my colleagues Manoji and Job here. This lecture series launched to help connect critical postmedia studies to a broader audiences. I made this new field. We actually tried to make this new field, and then that's why it is very noteworthy, we can begin this meaningful event with Slavoj Zizek. Undoubtedly, he is one of the preeminent, the intellectual and the philosopher who have participated in many practical events, and his new book about Hegel raises urgent and timely issues, preserving further intervention into the link between technology and capitalism in the pandemic situation we experience today. Slavoj already wrote several books and then about Hegel, and then applied his interpretation of Hegelianism for analyzing current situation and issues. He's one of the most prolific writers today, and then does not stop writing day and night. The Slavoj published 2 books about COVID-19 pandemic last year already, and many articles about global politics, including United States elections and Trump and the Brexit and the Russian, the agendas. Above all, his appeal to the reinvention of communism, in particular, brings out the various resonances across the world. And in particular, actually, global South, he has a huge influence on the global South activism. Above all, his appeal to communism is actually, produced lots of effect, and then, as much as his previous works, by which he could gain international influences, controversy, and substantial audiences, his recent works of Hegel also embrace various spectrums around the Marxism, psychoanalysis, and poststructuralism. In his new book, and we're gonna actually deal with this new book today, Hegel in a Wired Brain, quite a sexy title, Hegel in the actually, in the Wired Brain. Slavoj seems to continue his project by taking technological advancements such as AI and algorithm, and then so-called these days actually the fourth, in industrial revolution. And this book does not reject the assumption of singularity, but actually in the the AI, the science, but philosophize it properly. So he does not want actually reject the technological advancement, but try to philosophize it. I think this actually retain kind of continuity from the philosophical project, since the Bergson tried to produce kind of metaphysics of science and technology. So that's why just we choose this book. This book is quite timely and urgent. The Slavoj wants to know how to the direct link of brain to the machine could handle the unconscious. As far as I understand, this book deals with this problem directly. In his terms, the unconscious is the locus where the Hegelian dialectic works out in full swing, a mode of subjectivity retroactively inventing a point of origin. For instance, his explanation of Hegel's concept of uns. So that is very fantastic. And then also it could be reached at many actually different fields. So this creation only happens after it affects human mind and behavior. A central credo of this book is the void that makes the human beings as a subject, and its consequences for singularity in technological development such as AI. So he uses Hegel to let us understand what is happening around in terms of technology these days. In particular, actually, this kind of technological situation by which the global capitalism, still survive. So we actually gonna talk about, the aftermath, when he finished this book. That means we already had, quite different experience, from what he actually discussed in this book. So that's why just we prepare this, the debate, and then we're gonna actually give some kind of question to him. Yeah, please actually big applause to him, and then just welcome, to him actually join our, the event. Thank you for coming, Slavoj.
I'm grateful to be here. Thank you very much. But I don't like this remains of bourgeois cult of celebrities and individualism in you, like that you focus on me. I warn you, technologically, from the standpoint of science and so on, I don't know a lot about this project of the so-called wired brain. Mm-hmm. I don't know in what sense it can happen, probably in a very limited way. Mm-hmm. What I'm trying to guess is if it will happen, what mm-hmm. will this mean for our everyday life, for our freedom? Is this, as some pessimists think, the end of human freedom, that we can be totally transparent to some digital machine, and especially to those who control this digital machine? Or, as some others think, are we entering a new post-human collective awareness where some even speak theological language, where we will be in immediate spiritual contact, not only with each other, but that through this, millions of individuals united in the same mental space, we will create a new form of divinity. Mm-hmm. Now, which view, what will happen, and especially which part of the human being, the way we know it now, will survive? Another thing that I find, and then I will stop, I will try to be short. Another thing that I find interesting is the combination of this technological trend of wired brain, to put it in a very simple way, wired brain simply means that your mental processes could be and it's already happening, although in a very limited, primitive way, directly registered, perceived by some digital machine. And if another person is linked, also attached to that machine, this means that, and the Elon Musk, who shouldn't be taken too seriously as a scientist, but he is a kind of a trend-setting prophet. The dream is that language will no longer be needed, human language in this case. Because when I think something, it will be immediately transparent to you, language is not needed. Now, my point is, what does this mean for the structure of subjectivity? What does it mean for the structures of domination? Should we be pessimists in the sense that either machine itself or those who control the machine are controlling us, not in the old totalitarian way, where police is observing you and so on. And this is even a step further from our usual idea of digital control, where we know this. Machines now register practically everything, all the data, all that we do. If you read through Kindle, what do you buy, all financial transactions, even your emotions and so on. But here we go a step further. In the usual forms of digital control, your acts, mental decisions, I buy this, I watch that TV program, are registered. But here, the idea is that directly your lived self-experience can be. Of course, as usual, when those in power present this idea, they do the humanitarian trick. They always evoke extreme medical cases when this could be of some use, you know. Like they say, for example, there is a guy who is totally crippled, but if you attach him to a computer which can identify his basic ideas and so on, you make life much easier for him. For example, we already have, I always mention the example of Stephen Hawking. I was told that before he died, he no longer needed his finger, the only part that he was able to move, but he just thought forward and his wheelchair was moving forward. So it's a magic dimension where you think and your thoughts, this is divine-like in the usual sense of the divine, directly imply reality. But the problem is, of course, that it also goes the other way around. The machine or those who are behind the machine control you. And so what will all this mean to capitalism? Here, I will stop. Just 2 points, 2 questions I want to raise. You know, I am trying to speak as naively and plainly as possible. First, how will this change our self-understanding as human beings? Because all our interaction is based on language, and all our communication is based on the ambiguities of language, how you say something, but you really mean another thing, and so on, all these paradoxes of communication. Will the digital machine be able to read all this, or will there be some complications? My thesis is maybe a little bit too optimistic, that what Freud called the unconscious escapes the digital machine. It's a very specific notion of the unconscious. The second thing is that these new possibilities of social control open up by different forms of directly attaching machines to our mind gained a special importance with not only the ongoing pandemic. And since you are here from India, I want to tell you that I'm quite fascinated how comparatively India is not doing so bad per capita, you know. Everybody thought, oh, India, dirty country, big chaos, and so on. It will be a catastrophe. No, no, you have, if one can trust, I don't know, your numbers in India, then you are doing much better than an average West European, much more in superficial technological sense, but you are developed now. Top consumerist developed state. But what I want to say is that as a reaction of pandemic, you know, here I see this idea of a wired brain, where also you can have then viruses implanted. Now I'm talking about digital viruses and real life biological viruses. I see a certain echo in this too. Why? Because as we usually say, lockdowns and so on, as a consequence of pandemic, limited our social contacts. I repeatedly said that I don't think our social contacts are limited, just our bodily contact, bodily proximities are limited. When I am asked by journalists, what do you miss most in this time of lockdowns? My answer is always the same. I miss my loneliness, you know. I want to be more alone. You know why? It's not just a cheap paradox, but our everyday state is trying to control us now more than ever. They say, and they are maybe right, because to prevent the virus to spread and so on. But we are, those in power use this to expand even more the control of all our means of communication. And just to conclude, please allow me this, then I give you all the time. This is, for example, now I will speak as an old-fashioned Marxist. One of the points when I felt, no, I cannot feel sympathy for Donald Trump, you know, but that something unjust happened to him. When you remember, when 2 weeks ago or when he was excluded, excommunicated by, I call them, like we call them in Maoist times, the gang of four of our digital space: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and okay, YouTube. Now, in the case of Trump, I said, good, why not exclude him? But the problem is this one. As we all know, a guy, they said, by example, Twitter or Facebook excluded, canceled his account, excluded Trump. Who did this exactly? Do they have some ethical committee? Did they, who did this decision? You know why this is important? Because de facto, these four entities which form the gang of four, Twitter and so on, are today our public space, our commons. Even what we do now is mediated through this technology, and they are all privatized. So it means this is not like going to another restaurant and so on. If you buy books, you almost have to do in many countries with Amazon, and so on and so on. So we have now a new type of mega capital which doesn't exploit you directly.
That's quite important point.
Getting the rent, it's rent. I think we are returning to rent. Bill Gates, for example, became so wealthy because he is collecting rent from owning part of our public space. And this, I think, has to be in some sense stopped. this is the destruction of our public space when a private company, which then of course can be connected with secret police, other agencies and so on, is controlling our public space and can cut us off whenever it wants and so on and so on. I talked too much, I'm sorry, please.
Yeah, actually, you actually raised a very important point. Actually people seem quite confused, with that kind of transparency. Actually, there's some liberal and then individualist, try to insist, that kind of a big data would, take over our privacy, our private, the life, something like that. But you actually raised some different question. Actually, this big company will use, this kind of data, without permission, and then I think that actually the example you actually took, the Trump, case, that actually somebody, decided, one guy would, the one or two guys.
We don't know who, what mechanism.
Exactly. That is actually something behind this scene, something behind this scene. So that is so important point, in my opinion. So it's not the kind of the state power, it's not kind of a big brother. That is a real big brother, behind this scene. But it actually those people behave like a good, the guy, and then like a Superman, try to save the world, the prohibiting ban, actually the billions, Twitter, something like that. So that's a very interesting point.
But can I just say, and then you will pardon me, I will shut up.
Okay.
Do the others also know, Alex, your text that you've sent me about your experience of watching the two movies?
Yeah.
How it was suggested by some algorithm and so on, So again, what makes me sad in such experiences, I'm not a paranoiac. I don't mind if they try to guess based on my past choices what I would like to watch next. What just annoys me is that now this is a comical interlude, that in my case, they are usually totally inefficient. All this from on Amazon, on Netflix, suggestions, what should I want, and so on, they always miss it. Never again. But what I want to say is that, you see, they are not just controlling us. They are suggesting choices. They are actively trying to manipulate us to define. They are doing something much more dangerous than just choosing. Like in North Korea, probably, sorry to mention the country, in North Korea, you don't have this choice. You are simply expected or told to watch when the leader has a speech or whatever, no freedom. But I find our type of freedom maybe even more dangerous, where you think that you are still acting as a free individual. You browse around, you look, but the very space of possible choices is determined by some algorithms and by people who can manipulate these algorithms and so on and so on. That's why I think your example, Alex, is very important. How in this case, it even had a relatively good result because you made a nice comparative study between the same melodramatic topic, but the two films, But so you were well manipulated. A friend, no, in this case, a friend, good friend, could have done something of the same order to you. An American friend could have told you, because you first watched the Bollywood film, no? Mm-hmm. Could have told you, but my God, there is a Hollywood film which is a similar story, but with another twist. So it was not so, but the point I want to make is that excessive choice, and it's an impossible position almost, like you want to watch a movie if you are corrupted like me and I have on my big screen TV everything, that is to say HBO, Netflix, Amazon Prime Video. Mm-hmm. It's simply too much choice, and how this is a nice dialectical phenomenon, how too much choice can effectively cancel choice. Means you are, if there are hundreds of films there, you are helpless and all the more open to suggestions, you know. So I think that this type of mental control, steering, domination is, sorry to repeat my old mantra, is important because our usual definition of freedom is precisely what we are doing in front of a screen when we want to watch a movie. My God, you are free to choose, you just do whatever you want, you can even make risks and watch some secret data, some hardcore pornography, you are free. But for this reason, the most dangerous form of unfreedom is the unfreedom that you experience as freedom, that you don't even experience as unfreedom. And second thing, let's not forget that whenever there are multiple choices, I always suspect that they are obfuscating one real choice. This is for me the crucial distinction. I'm always suspicious when people say you can choose from 30, 40 movies. Okay, but where is the real choice? Sorry, I talked too much.
All right, so I think actually that is a very interesting. We actually get into a very interesting topic. You know, actually how the kind of algorithm would influence actually our behavior. But actually, I want to get back to your actually mention about Luther. Martin Luther's book is he actually criticized the church, to sell actually that kind of future scene, scene actually not yet to happen. But
Yeah.
I think that this kind of algorithm industry would, sell that kind of our future behavior. They try to sell a kind of possibility of our modification, of our behavior. That means they actually try to actually change our behavior, not the control us. They try to guide our desire, just like actually the churches, the certificate, actually you pay this certificate and you actually future sin gonna be forgiven, something like that. So that means if you buy this, the commodity, the cultural commodity, you would actually enjoy your life better, something like that. It's a better life. They promised us, kind of better life. So this is my opinion,
I first, all my sympathy to the other three guys. I see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. To the other 4 guys, I'm just afraid that the two of us, but by this I mean me especially, are simply monopolizing the space too much. Couldn't we include a little bit what the other 4 expect to hear?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
You were talking too much. You're talking about this world brain and the apparatus of captures that we are surrounded with. In this context, I want to ask you one question. Do you still hold your disagreement with Agamben, a proposed surveillance and control measures adopted by the state machines across the globe, normalizing the state of exception, as you pointed out in your book on COVID?
It's a good question. Yes, I do stick to it absolutely. And okay, this will be a kind of a low blow, But what put me into a panic is how, do you know that many American right-wing, the populist new right, say the same thing or even directly refer to Agamben? What I know, Agamben is a radical leftist politically. I mean, I know his politics. But what I fear is, did you read, he published now in Italian, and I saw, I don't know if it was legal, an English translation, where it sounds really tragic what he is saying. He is no longer denying COVID. His idea is no longer that old naive one, you know, that it's just a form of flu, it's exaggerated and so on. No, he even accepts that maybe it's the end of the world, it's the end of us. But he then quotes old traditions where saying when your house is burning, it's his metaphor, the only decent thing to do is to go on with your daily life as far as possible in a normal way, to stick to old rituals and so on and so on. And I think, without implying a dirty false thing that he is somehow connected with the Trump mob and so on, but if you abstract from the excesses, and they are not marginal, of what Trump followers are doing, we should not forget, my God, that their basic reaction is our usual daily way of life is threatened. And although what they understand by way of life is not just meeting friends, having a drink, it's basically the way of life of white middle classes. They feel a whole series of threats. You have the threat of other races penetrating the United States, posing a danger, rapists, whatever you want, killers, drug dealers. Then you have things like pandemic and so on, medical crisis. You have economic crisis because of outsourcing of industries, whatever. They see a whole, and also global warming. For them, this is a plot. It doesn't exist. So their answer is a paranoiac one. It is, behind this, there must be one big plot. But nonetheless, their basic experience, insight, their basic insight that our way of life, the way we knew it till now, with all our so-called individual freedoms like having a gun, free access to arms. You know that there was one industry in the United States which in the last year profited even more than health industry. Comparatively, it's the arms industry. Now, everybody wants to be armed and so on. But what I'm saying is that not only because of COVID pandemic, but if you add first other, not only the variations, mutations of the virus, but other pandemics which are threatening, then what is happening at the level of global warming and other catastrophes? Didn't you in India, you just barely avoided it, I think, a mega invasion by locusts from Eastern Africa, no? It crossed the Arab countries, then it stopped somewhere in India. These are gigantic catastrophes. Or, for example, forget about people. You know how many hundreds of millions of pigs they had to, okay, if you are from a Muslim university, you don't care about this, but hundreds of millions of pigs were killed there. So, and what crazy things are happening we see in temperatures. For example, we were shocked a week ago, okay, it's from our perspective, but the same things must be happening elsewhere. In Spain, they had 60 centimeters of snow, freezing. In Greece, in Athens, it was 31 degrees and so on, people could swim. So what I'm saying is that, unfortunately, I think we are entering a new era. We will have to change the basic coordinates of our life. I think we should drop this perspective of, oh, just that we will be all vaccinated and then we return to normality. No, this is my first premise. It's the beginning of a very difficult state of emergency. And my answer to Agamben would be here, yes, it's even worse than you think. And I don't think this state of emergency could be accounted for as the way of a state to control us more, to establish more authority. Yes, this is true, but you know what is much more frustrating? Is that especially in many highly developed countries, in spite of this new mode of controlling our movements and so on, as the latest numbers show, the state even cannot do this. How limited is the state in what it can do? They cannot control. They cannot control, because I think that what is so, I would like to draw a contrast between the first wave of pandemic and now. This sounds Eurocentric. By first wave, I simply mean the first ep, because other parts of the world didn't have the same two waves. You know, this is really very Eurocentric. But what I want to say is this. In March, April, it was what I ironically called a normal panic. We were in a panic, you know. Now it's no longer just panic. Now it's, I call it simply depression. People act in a much more relaxed relief. The worst is over. It's everything is lost. Who knows what will happen, and so on. So who cares what we do? In Slovenia, in my country, we have now 20 times more cases per day than in March, April, when we were in total lockdown. But life is much more relaxed. People simply accepted this as our fate, and so on and so on. So what gives me, I wouldn't say hope, but some opening is precisely that. And now I come to the unfortunate word communism. No, I am not an idiot. I don't think now all of a sudden a big new communist party will emerge, democratic, open, progressive, and will save us. No, I'm just saying this, that it's in a way generally accepted, basically, a couple of things which are crucial, incredible. That first, market mechanisms, I'm not saying we should directly move into some kind of a state-run economy, but should be in some sense socialized. The state or community, I don't know precisely in what way, for example, should decide we need vaccines, we need this, we need that, and it's not enough to say we will use market mechanisms, print money, solicit companies. It has to be done fast. Economy, in some basic dimensions, should be socialized. There are tremendous challenges ahead of us here. The first thing. The second thing, a kind of universal egalitarianism. Of course, rich states already are cheating like crazy. The world record in vaccinations is Israel now, no. But the way I read, they mostly ignore the West Bank, which is under their control. But what I want to say is that nonetheless, everybody agrees in principle that the pandemic could only be fought through this, through some kind of egalitarianism, and so on and so on. So I think that, are we aware what is already happening with capitalism? Yes, on the one hand, COVID meant a much stronger social separation. The few rich got much more rich, middle class disappearing. We know the story, the poor even more, and so on. And I think that again, this cannot be left to the market. Some kind of social action is needed, and it can be done. I don't think the Chinese have a monopoly on it, you know. Then I'm immediately accused, oh, you want us to act like a Chinese Communist Party. No, then I take one example which many people don't like. But my God, listen, Taiwan did it even more efficiently than China. You know, take the case of Taiwan, which precisely resists being part of China. And their numbers are even better than in China. Or take Vietnam and so on. So it's not enough just to have a state bureaucracy. Some kind of community will have to be re-emerged. And just to finish, this seems to me important. Now when people tell me, but listen, you dream about this is just rhetorics. In reality, what is happening is just that capital is taking over more than ever, and so on and so on. I say yes, but this is already a reaction to the threat that they feel. Because on the one hand, look what even Trump and Boris Johnson had to do. Because in our ideological situation, you cannot openly allow too many people to starve. There is a limit in our liberal sensitivity, which is not bad because, for example, when there was 100 years ago or more in India and other places, a big starvation, the British simply, as they did in Ireland before, isolated that part of the country and left millions to die. That's at least one small sign of progress. Today, when there is big hunger somewhere, it somehow makes it to the media. So my point is that, yes, those empowered people, but look, even Trump felt obliged to propose the check of $2,000 to every family or whatever, which means a form of universal basic income. Boris Johnson nationalized temporarily railways to organize them and so on. So even conservatives in power have to do some, under quotation marks, communist measures. Now, friends tell me, but of course you do this when there is war, and this is comparable to war. So, but later, when things will come back to normal, all this will be forgotten. Well, I don't think there will be later in the sense of, you know, somewhere, maybe even in 1 year from now, we will just forget about this, you know, and return to normal life. I think we are entering a new period of permanent emergency. And my formula here, I repeat it for the 10th time, my most favorite one is the one that I heard in Chile. You know, how did the popular movement react to this general catastrophic perspective? The end of the world is coming, you know. Their reply was not, no, if we take over, there will be no crisis. But no, their reply was, another end of the world is possible. You know, we have to do our own end of the world. Because just to conclude, I hope we all agree in this, what I say now. There are different strategies of how our enemies are trying to counteract this obvious push towards some kind of socialization, communism, and so on. One is the Trumpian populist one, denying you silently went over how many people died, just to retain normal life. The other is the technocratic solution. Most of us living in bubbles under total state control and so on and so on. This is the Bill Gates solution. We also should decline it. And now it's our chance. What I reject, the most dangerous idea for me, much more dangerous than Trumpian populism, is this idea. Now we are in a time of emergency, which, and here I agree with Agamben, if you read it him in this way, now we are living in a time of emergency, which means that there is no time for politics. Like in a bet, you cannot debate with your officer, you know. We have to follow orders. Science and state and health administration will tell us what to do. Forget about emancipatory political activity.
Okay, may I jump in?
Please.
Is it okay to, you know, pleasure to be with you, Slavoj, and let me play devil's advocate a little bit, because you
who is the devil in this case?
Well, let me get to that. I will be, okay, because
okay.
let me turn to your book, because in your book there is no mention whatsoever of resistance. Not one word regarding resistance. So I would like to hear something about what you feel might be a way to somehow to plug in or plug out of the wired brain. So for me, when we think about someone like Elon Musk, I'm always thinking like he's a bit like Trump, like as you call Trump, the obscene other. And when I was thinking about this idea of, okay, so how would Slavoj think about some kind of resistance? Well, maybe he would invoke Hegel's idea of a shifting perspective, perhaps, okay, in terms of the wound and how that concept might work in this kind of wired brain, this collective intelligence. But then the other side of it, this concern with freedom and whether we would be aware that we're being somehow kind of directed artificially. Well, that brought to me the idea of bad faith, something like the Sartrean idea of bad faith, where, as you know, in Sartre, this idea of a unification of freedom, of the for itself with the in itself, and that would be Elon Musk's idea of God, this kind of absolute spirit, as you argument, it seems to me, is working out. But then it seems to me from that, then, like, why not dispense with desire, with individual desires? Why? Because it's so much work to desire. So why not give yourself over to the collective algorithmic unconscious? Why not be directed by these obscene others like Trump or like Elon Musk? Or why not have bespoke pornography tailored to you artificially? Why not have that? Why not embrace virtual reality, a better than life reality? Why not have direct access to that? Why do we need to be concerned with language? Why we can dispense with language? Why not have this artificial language given to us? It seems that we could have whatever fetish you want, every minor fetish could be given over to ourselves, and then we could be unified in this perverse collective algorithmic unconscious. But the other side to that is language. I mean, it's not just one universal language. There are languages which you could say would resist this kind of this invasion by people like Elon Musk. I mean, if Lacan said about what Lacan said about the Japanese language, or maybe what Freud said about the unconscious of the Irish, maybe that is the means where we resist somehow. Maybe there is a structural part of concrete languages which might offer a way to resist in some way. So I guess my frustration with your idea of the wired brain is that there's no question of what the world brain might be. And then you have a rich resource in the 20th century of people like Vladimir Vernadsky, or then Teilhard de Chardin, even H.G. Wells, who would give us a way to think about the kind of, as you said, this kind of horrific organization of the internet as we have now. And that would be a kind of a means to resist, I think, using that kind of particular language. So, yeah, so I'll leave it there if you have a response.
Thanks very much. A very precise, I appreciate it, good, brutal, but brutal in a good sense, clear question. You know, first, what I fear is the most interesting part in what you said for me were desire, let's just enjoy it, let's our immersion into it, let's abandon desire, and so on and so on. It's that I'm generally a pessimist here. I think that if we do this, the result, I'm not professionally a psychoanalyst. It's obvious, look at me, I'm half crazy. If anybody would like to be my patient, he definitely is crazy then. Don't. But I know enough about even clinic, where they told me that today the typical problem for psychoanalysts is no longer oppression and how to restore your desire. It's that you feel like in this, what you say, what you described as your utopia, we all of us are with our fetishes and so on and so on. I claim that even before the pandemic, even before this prospect of the wired universe and so on, this was already happening. My pessimism is in this, what you described as utopia, each of us, again, our small desires and so on, where I can easily imagine this multiple perverse universe where everything will be permitted to each of us, he, she, it, his, her, its own small fantasy. But I think that precisely this kind of global permissivity, here I am, an insupportable Hegelian dialectician, would have and is already ending in, I call it, I know I will provoke many people by this politically correct terror. Because, you know, there is always this trick. Yes, everything should be permitted, but to make sure that everything is permitted, that there are no double game secret orders, we should regulate very well what can you do so that you are really free. So I think that first, the state that you are describing fits perfectly what friends are telling me today, friends in the clinic. We are entering a period where sexuality is disappearing. You know that people less and less engage in sexuality actively, at least in the so-called, I'm sorry for the term, developed Western countries. And if they do, quite a lot of it is virtual sex. So this, to answer, I think that what you described as this universe of shared consciousness where each to us has its own perversions and so on and so on. Well, the first question I ask is, if we are immersed into this collective self-awareness, will we still have each of us our own small fantasies? This is what always interested me. Here, this type of collective enjoyment, I am afraid that de facto it will end in not a new form of oppression, but I use the term here, depression. You know, as Agamben himself, in his big book on melancholia and whatever, demonstrated very nicely, melancholic depression is not that you lose something, but you cannot abandon it. Melancholia is a kind of preemptive mourning. The object is here accessible to you, but you lose the desire for that object. And this is depression. Depression is, yes, I can have it, but I lose the interest for it. So the second thing that I would add here instantly is, can we even imagine the sexuality we have it now without the so-called even straight sexuality, without all its brutal aspects, ambiguity? For example, Freud showed it in a very convincing way, true more than ever, I claim today, that the prohibition of desire always turns necessarily into a desire for prohibition. You, in a perverted way, start to enjoy the very prohibitions. And I know this, how this happens in pandemic. Many of my obsessional, neurotic, compulsive, neurotic friends, and here I am my own friend, I am doing it, is that all this, you know, don't shake hands with you, give a distance. I began to enjoy this as new rituals. I no longer even take them as an oppression. So as something that I don't enjoy. I openly enjoy these rituals. So again, what I am afraid is that this new state, without of globalized perversion, de facto could mean globalized depression. Because, you know, sex, I will repeat a story, most of you know it, but it's my favorite, from that I found, I think, even with some stupid comment in The Guardian. Eva Weissman, I think, lady commentator there, was shocked. She watched something which I think is very instructing to watch. No irony here. Not hardcore pornography, but movies about the making of hardcore pornography. You know, like the camera is 5-10 yards behind all it, and you see the whole scene. And there is an example there. She was shocked by it, which tells everything to me. It shows standard heterosexual act, the guy, woman on the bed, the guy is doing it. Then in the middle of the scene, while they are shooting it, the guy steps back and said, sorry, I'm losing erection. Could please somebody bring me quickly my iPhone so that I go on Pornhub to get excited again? Now there is open absurdity in this. You had there the ultimate object itself, wet, excited woman, but isn't this, what more do you want? No, you need fiction. You need virtual images to arouse you in reality. And I think this is the nature at its most elementary of our sexuality.
Slavoj.
Yeah.
I think actually Joff would have another comment on the.
Please. Joff. I'm sorry, I just talk. You, Alex, should be more the dominatrix. Yeah. Interact me more.
Thank you for that. It makes a lot of sense. But then, you know, it's perfect that we're talking about your book today because of Trump and the impeachment, and you mention it in your book. So I just picked up on your concept of the obscene other, and as you referred to Trump, and then I was thinking about the current iteration of the World Wide Web, and you know, as you know, the flows of data across the planet are like stupid Netflix or Amazon, or 2/3 of the internet flows are pornography, you know, in some form. So then in some way, then, you know, it's not a question of desire anymore. It's a question of the drives being uncoupled and being, you know, having free reign. And that is precisely the point where we should begin to form a critique of people like these obscene others, like Elon Musk, because those guys, you know, if Trump, you know, and these ridiculous TV shows and things like this is the pure unbinding of the drives. And then we have all kinds of mental implosion as a consequence. Now, that to me is a way to offer some perspective on some perspective on resistance. And as you say in your book, this is a question of the shift in perspective, what we need. So then, for me, asking someone of great eminence like you, I am demanding some idea of resistance.
Well, now my answer may disappoint you here, but it will maybe, I do it as a provocation. I am 99% convinced by my own argument, not all the way. Yes, I agree with you. But the true miracle for me is still, although he was sidestepped, it looked bad whatsoever, but okay, let me begin with Trump and then pass on to Bernie Sanders. I don't have any big illusions about Bernie Sanders, but I want to focus on another dimension here. Whenever I get to debate Trump, I got this argument, he just says what he thinks, he's totally unleashed and so on. No, he is a pervert. But you know what Freud says? Nowhere is it more difficult to access the unconscious than in perversion. Perverts are not really free people. Oh, I want to screw you in this way, I can do whatever I want and so on. No, perverts are really the most calculating, self-controlled people. So I think that all this Trump's openness and so on, no, he is a deeply compulsive person. If Trump is not something, he is not a really liberating pervert. And also another thing, a term that I'm now writing a text on it that I would like to introduce. What happened in Capitol, incidentally, I don't think it was a real coup. It was a farce, a carnival. But you know how in my youth, Herbert Marcuse turned around Marx. He said that, you know, Marx said first as a tragedy, then as a farce, and Marcuse said apropos fascism, it's first a farce, then as a tragedy. Fascism appears first as a farce. And this was a big carnivalesque farce. For me, sorry to lose time with this, but I find it a wonderful detail. For me, the image of Capitol and the mob entering it is, you know, I don't know his name, that idiot with a kind of a Viking-like helmet with horns, you know. Yeah. But do you know, I'm a specialist in this. This is my private right-wing dream. I liked Vikings when I was young. Do you know that historically Vikings never had helmets with horns? Horns were invented in early 19th century, late Romantic imagination. Some people think that even during the staging of first Wagner's operas. So what I'm saying here is that my answer to conservatives, these neoconservatives who support Trump, would be maybe crazy, paradoxical for you. It would have been, you are afraid of this multiculturalism, historicist relativism, and so on of postmodern culture. Why are you then for Trump? If there ever was a postmodern relativist, historicist, pervert, cynical president, it was Trump. And the way Bernie enters the show for me, and politically, I think we should shamelessly appropriate this approach. Bernie measured by the most strict classical moralistic standard. Bernie is basically a pretty decent, as far as we can say, simple, ordinary man. It was the same with Jeremiah Corbyn. What fascinated people is them was, I don't know what's the reality behind, but I think it's time for us who still want to resist, be the left, to get the lesson which many people resist to, that a certain type of language of transgression, don't identify, carnival, play a game, everything is relative and so on. It's more and more part of the discourse of those in power today. And that to resist this ordinary, naive call to decency is very important. And even in the most moralistic, normal sense, do you know, first I thought this is my crazy idea, but then in so many countries that I visited, I got the same message. I was even involved, I did some videos supporting Lucio Arce, the finance minister who now returned to power in Bolivia. He was already economy minister. And I have even a brief contact with him, and he told me, I consider myself as a socialist technocrat, you know, like ordinary, decent efficiency. In Chile, where they have those gigantic protests, you know, it was, sorry to use this Lacanian jargon word, the master signifier, the main symbol of the rebellion. Not abolish capitalism, socialize, but decency. People feel robbed of their decency. The same was in Turkey. In Turkey, when there were 2-3 years ago, the big demonstrations there. So I think that the way to break out of this vicious cycle of, on the one hand, this new right obscenity, which is a carnival, a mode of carnival, which again doesn't mean it shouldn't be taken seriously. It begins as a carnival, then give it a couple of years, it can turn into another thing. Don't remember that Nazis were also in Germany, if you read history. Till late 20s, they were mostly perceived as a fringe right-wing group with their obscene jokes, ridiculous, people laughed at them, and so on and so on. No, first it's a farce, then it's a tragedy. And I think how to prevent this, I think to really resist, we should mobilize what too many people today dismiss as even a neo-conservative thing, like common decency, morality, and so on. And that is, for me, you may disagree, the genius of Bernie Sanders. He said once that we should not get caught into this liberal democratic centrist wish of just remaining in the center, not moving too much to the left so that we don't lose the middle voices. No, we should follow Trump here. The more Trump went to the extreme, the more votes he got. And we should do the same in the sense that, as Bernie said, our target should be disappointed Trump voters. All those ordinary people, although who feel threatened. Although the situation I know is more complex because we now know that all those ordinary people in the capital, first, most of them were middle class, even upper middle class, and second, they were supported financially by billionaires and so on and so on. But I think that one thing, maybe it's too modest, that we have to do is to do what Julian Assange was doing, to make the game transparent, in the sense that people should know as much as possible on how they are controlled and so on and so on. Here again, I have a paradoxical conclusion or implication. I don't think people really don't know. Quite many of us are these compromising guys who prefer not to know. You know, I met some ordinary middle-class Americans after, how is it called, that? not Abu Ghraib, in Iraq, that prison where all those photos came out, how American soldiers were torturing, humiliating. Yeah, yeah. You know, sorry? Yeah, you know that many of my friends, they are no longer my friends, of course, because of this. The reaction was, we know this is going on, but why to render this public? Like, torture, do whatever you want, just do it discreetly. Do it behind the closed door. We don't want to know about it. No, people should be forced to know about it. That's why we need Assange. And here, although I'm not totally pro George Orwell, I always repeat maybe the greatest for me saying of Orwell, not all that stuff, Brave New World, War is Peace, whatever, but when he said that freedom of the press really means that you are free to tell the people what they don't want to hear. If you cannot do this, then there is no freedom of the press. So I wouldn't, when you say resistance, I will just conclude with another endlessly repeated by me, Benjamin's thought that fascism is always a sign or the result of a failed revolution. For me, precisely this populist Trump rebellions is an eternal reminder that we, the left, lost our chance. And I think that, unfortunately, through more catastrophes and so on, things are not so bad for us. Look what happened in the last years in the United States. It's a tremendous achievement. The term socialism was publicly rehabilitated. You can use it as a legitimate orientation and even get elected to the Congress and so on and so on. Things are coming. There are rebellions here and there. I'm not too optimistic here. So I don't worry about will we be able to resist it or not. I worry much more about ways of the establishment, the populist new right, to reappropriate those forms of rebellion.
All right. So, Slavoj, actually, we have two questions from audiences. One is actually already answered, by we actually discussed the kind of resistance. And another one is Tashik Barol question here. Data appropriation goes unquestioned in most of our society. Is this a result of desanitization? So,
of the result of the last word I didn't understand.
Desensitization. Sensitization. Yeah.
That's a very interesting point, if I understood the question correctly, because, we speak about this, again, permissive society, everything public and so on, but to focus about how in all these freedoms and so on, new taboos emerge all the time. And so, yes, I think that the era we are entering now, at least at the level of pleasure, sexual life, and so on, is a kind of it's not just, maybe I didn't understand the question, it's not just not enough sanitization, older things can be brought out and so on. No, behind all this, there are still some fundamental prohibitions on both sides. I don't think that, in contrast to left liberal, politically correct fanatics, although they also have their own unspoken rules, secrets, I don't think that the new popular right is really this type of outspoken, exploiting, exploding freedom. No, they are even more self-control. They know very well whom to attack, what to do, in what sense, and so on. So, sorry, we are, this is for me again, the fundamental paradox today. That's why I feel alive as a Hegelian today. How things turn into their opposite. You know, you want true permissivity, you end up with a long list of politically correct prohibitions. You get, you want to be this free, pseudo-free, of course, alternative right, obscene guy, we can use dirty words, look what Trump was doing, and so on and so on. But you end in a much more oppressive society. You end in a combination of oppression and depression. So I think that, you know how in history the term order, new order, was mostly reappropriated by fascists even, no? Fascists said, too much chaos, we need a new order, but it wasn't always so. Antonio Gramsci, when he was still in freedom, you know that he was editing a communist journal whose title was Il Nuovo Ordine, the new order. And I think we should approach it in the same way. The new world order is the right motto. It's just totally reappropriated by the new capital. The new world order is something very interesting. Global capital, I'm not paranoiac, but like the predominant spontaneous opinion of them, is that capitalism as we know it is in a crisis. It had to be reset. Our answer should be yes, but not on your capitalist terms. We really need a new order. And we should think in these terms. I'm here, maybe a leftist fascist, I don't care. But my point is, I don't like this leftist dreaming of, even some of my leftist friends were fascinated by capital events. They said, look, we, the real people, should be doing this, not just the Trump mob. They almost cried like, my God, isn't it nonetheless nice? People penetrated that, no? I told him, yes, this is a momentary carnival. We leftists should do something else. Ask what will happen the day later. Let's say that the upheaval, the revolution, whatever wins. What new order will we establish the morning after, when you get sober? How will ordinary people feel the difference? That's why you all know probably the movie V for Vendetta, where at the end, popular movement wins, enters the parliament, people take over, and it's the end of the movie. And my point is always, I use it in my books, that I would give all the money I have for a movie called V for Vendetta Part 2. Okay, they take over. What will they do then? What will they do in industry? How will they socialize it and so on? And I don't think it's a totally hopeless situation here. Like what you, my Indian friend, told me Kerala, no? Yeah. Communists are doing there a modest job, but they are doing something. Or my favorite example, Bolivia. Bolivia, the carnival was there from the right. The right wing organized a coup against Morales and his regime, which was very orderly, well organized, knew they were doing, they didn't screw up the economy. And my God, in elections, which were probably really free, not to control, they came back again to power. We should follow guys like that. I think I am tired of the leftists who secretly enjoy their failures, you know. Like there was an element of this with some people in Syriza. We lost, oh, now we can retire to our tenured university posts and write thick books about why we had to lose. We need victories, not triumphant victories, but victories which show people that we really can change their daily lives. It can be done.
That's very actually the good conclusion of your talk. Actually, any more question or comment?
I would like to do it again, but where you, Alex, or who is the leader, did you see, all of you, I repeat all this joke, the James Bond movie Goldfinger, where you have that famous car with a red button, you press it and the guy sitting next to you is thrown out. So that you will have, Alex, that red button, if I get to talk too much, you press it. So why don't we do it again, but without focusing on me? I'm genuinely interested in your perspective.
Yeah, actually, you're already member of our network. Is a Critical Postmedia.
Yeah, but
network.
it's not enough to be a member. Stalin was also just a member of the Politburo. But
we must reverse. We must reverse Stalin. We must reverse Stalin.
You want to be a new Stalin or what?
I love that.
Yeah, no, quite seriously. I would love to see, because I am, especially when I'm caught into some appearing to me to be convincing ideas, I'm afraid that I'm too much immersed into my own topic. You know, that's my professional philosophical deformation. And I would like genuinely to see your perspective. How are things there? I'm not against universalism. I don't believe in this bullshit, you know, each of us is. No, in some sense, we are all universal. And the true universality is precisely a universality which only moves from one to another particularity. Like my idea, sorry to finish, really boring idea. Why is Shakespeare great? Because on the one hand, yes, it's typical product of his time. But it's not just that he has some universal message. What is so beautiful in Shakespeare is how that his big plays can be reinvented, restaged in totally different cultures. Like we have a Japanese friend there. Do you know that I think that the greatest, for me, maybe the greatest Shakespeare film is Kurosawa's, not his version of Macbeth, but you know that Kurosawa did in late 50s, I think, his version of Hamlet, but set in contemporary Japan, where Hamlet is a student in the United States. He returns home, the uncle killed his father, took over the company, and so on. It's totally set in contemporary Japan. Or again, Kurosawa, although I don't like him too much generally, but take Kurosawa's, I don't know what's the term, Kurosawa made also after the war the best version that I know of Idiot, of Dostoevsky's Idiot. Can you imagine a more different culture than Russian and Japanese? You can do it. And that's what I would like to get from you, you know, not your particular shit. I don't care about that, but the universal dimension that will be in it precisely when you are totally faithful to it. For example, my visit in India years ago, I loved, if nothing else, my meeting with a group of those who are the lowest caste who are cleaning toilets. Yeah, and you know, they gave me the best lesson against fake liberal identity politics. I asked them, what's your program? Their answer was, to put it very simply, our program is, we don't want to be what we are. It's none of it, we want to retain our unique experience or whatever, no. So please, Alex, if you are the secret boss, do it so that each of us will be in line to bore and the others.
Our plan is to organize a kind of series lecture, and then not focused on on the personality, but kind of topic centered. So we want to actually bring in more debate, about actually the series of topics, and which actually would be related to the current issues, and or some philosophical issues. We're gonna actually, if you publish the words, that we would actually talk about more things, you know, the related to the urgent issue. But the purpose of our series definitely create kind of fiction, you know, as you said, you know, we need to fiction, you know, after the revolution, something like that. Actually, revolution would come or whatever, you know, just people try to bring in, you know, the kind of impressive, you know, movement.
Yeah.
We should give them a kind of narrative, give them an idea, whatever called is a fiction. So, so that's why actually the important thing is we need to reinvent, you know, the communism, and we need to rethink, you know, the such a historical.
Yeah, but don't you agree? Sorry to interrupt the last time. With my basic idea that we are in a unique situation where many ideas, which if you were to mention them a year and a half ago, you would be accused of crazy leftist, impossible, like universal healthcare, centralization of healthcare, worldwide coordination, all that stuff is now obligatory. Even conservatives in power are forced to practice it. That's why I feel well, in some strange sense, that for the first time, we with our radical ideas are not talking into empty space. The situation is calling for our measures, and those in power are desperately trying to block this progressive potential opened up by the ongoing crisis. No?
Exactly. So, so we actually should intervene the many in a situation, including COVID-19. As you actually mentioned, the vaccine problem, you know, actually the disparity, you know, of the distribution of the vaccine, you know, actually poor country haven't got, you know, the vaccine enough, but you know, those, you know, country belong to global south, you know, is the took part of that kind of necessary work. That means the necessary workers mostly in the actually the global south, but they need a vaccine, you know, to support or some sustain this.
Yeah, but there is one good thing: there was a divine justice. Nonetheless, globally, in many poor countries, the numbers are nonetheless per capita lower. Like, how did you Indians do it? Do you have some theory? Let's say that your statistics, or do your statistics cheat or what? But it's wonderful. You get now lower numbers, even absolute numbers of new infections than France, Spain, England, and so on.
We don't trust the numbers.
Secret? Sorry?
We don't trust the numbers. I think the numbers are just like giving us a, like, you know, sort of a reality, but that is not real.
So you think that simply numbers are false? But nonetheless, there are some mysterious things here. For example, you know, those big refugee camps in northern Syria and so on. Syria, now talking about Syria. Yeah, everybody was afraid that since they live in such crowded, non-hygienic conditions there, if there will be a case of COVID there, it will explode. It didn't. It didn't. There is, like, sorry for the ironically obscene way of putting it, maybe this is a God who said, you in the developed West had enough of fun, it's time to punish you a little bit, you know. Because, you know what's so frustrating for us, not that we are very developed, Slovenia, but generally, how little we know about it. Again and again, we think this country controlled it and then it exploded. Now the latest horrors are Czech Republic and Portugal. So we don't not only know a lot, but we know more and more how much we don't know. It's not, we are far from controlling it. Sorry, but you see, this is what I would like to know. Things like this, you know. I'm very glad that in Kerala, communists are still, because I heard that precisely because of this shitty politics with farmers that in Kolkata, West Bengal, that they lost, no? power, or are they again in power? They lost. No?
Yeah, but
Okay.
in the Indian context, I think yeah, it was not as bad as we expected. Like in the first phase, like the tragic situation that we witnessed in Italy and all. That didn't like at that time we were expecting. Like I was in personally, I thought like what would be the Indian situation, but that way, yeah, we didn't go into that sort of a mess. Like, yeah, that is right. But I don't really trust the numbers coming out.
This is also maybe one of the reasons, because the rumor is that some of the Western European countries like Belgium, for commercial reasons, they report higher numbers. Anybody who dies and had COVID, even if he died of totally different reasons, they count it as a COVID death. You know why? Because COVID is considered dangerous and the hospital gets more money from the state and so on. So we have all these paradoxes. Some countries exaggerate it. Other countries are cheating in the opposite direction. For example, I know of a friend of mine, his mother was Russian and she died, and it was clear that it was from COVID. And you know what was the official listed reason of death? That I like it. Her heart stopped working. Well, this is the definition of death. You know, everybody dies of this. So I really think that this is so important that we get a kind of what Fred Jameson would have called global general mapping of the situation. So I really am sincerely sad of talking too much. Please treat me as your slave next time, and you speak, and you should do the other thing to me, not another James Bond feature, that some kind of digital control in Chinese schools, they already have it. They put in some elementary schools some kind of a ring which measures the brain activity, and if the child falls asleep, my proposal is you should put this on me. If you see that I'm non-attentive, then Alex or whoever presses a button which gives me an electric shock to awaken me so that I will follow actively. Thanks, I'm really grateful. And Alex, more terror on me, more terror on me.
All right, just I will invite you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you very much today.
And how is the situation in Korea? You are getting a little bit
actually,
better,
we
no?
successfully. I told you that actually we actually gonna successfully settle down. So the situation settled down. We reopened the shop, reopened the restaurant today.
No, because you are now no longer at 1,000. You are around 500 per day now, no?
Yeah, now actually the 300. Today is 300.
My God, you know that we, Slovenia, a country of 2 million,
really?
We are around 2,000 a day.
Yeah.
We are the worst. Now it's falling to 1,500. Let's not lose time. Alex, take care of yourself. My best greetings to all of you. And now I will be cynical. Now I have to prepare breakfast for my wife.
Stay safe. Stay safe. That's his job.
Thank you, Slavoj. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Pleasure.
Leave.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, just
Nice.
thank you for all
Thank
coming.
you, everybody.
Everybody. See you.